So there's so many different problem sets right now that I think, you know, each one has a timetable and
Mm,
each one has its own decision points.
mm.
And I know I could tell you this as the senior collector for 18th Airborne Corps, it was really difficult to keep a pulse on the entire world because you'd think you'd get the picture of the world, and then all of a sudden there'd be, let's say a random coup in Africa.
Welcome back to The Focus. I'm John Bruni. Today we're diving into the intersection of technology, intelligence, and situational awareness, and how one American company is helping redefine how individuals, organizations, and even governments keep their finger on the pulse of global events. Joining me from New York is my guest today, Shane Curtis, CTO and co-founder of Artorias, the team behind SITREP, a powerful new app that delivers curated real-time insights on global defense, security, and geopolitical developments. Before co-founding Artorias, Shane spent nearly a decade as an all-source intelligence analyst in the US Army at both tactical and strategic levels. He later served as a test and evaluation non-commissioned officer at the Intelligence and Electronic Warfare Test Directorate, where he helped test and field systems for the US Army, joint services, and partner nations like Ukraine. Later, he went on to become the senior OSINT analyst and trainer for the US Army's 18th Airborne Corps. Now he's bringing that experience to the tech world, leading Artorias in building tools that turn information overload into actionable intelligence. In an era where information moves faster than strategy, understanding what truly matters and why has never been more important. In this episode, we'll explore how tools like SITREP are helping decision makers stay ahead, not just by collecting data, but by turning complexity into clarity. Shane, welcome to The Focus.
Thank you for having me on, John.
Shane, let's start off with you. I mean, for those who won't know your background or don't know who you are, who is Shane Curtis and what drew you to the world of strategic intelligence and defense analytics?
And so I was a nerd. Pretty simple. I was a nerd, and I had an acquaintance who you could call the coach, who pointed me in the direction. He was a high-speed intel dude in the army. Um, did lots of stuff for over 20 years, got out of CW5, and he kind of mentored me throughout my path. And once I started doing it, I fell in love with it. And I really started to understand how much of a need there was for someone to actually, kind of do the dirty work and understand what's going on to relay that information to the people that, need to make those decisions in real time.
You're one of the co-founders of Artorias. Can you tell us a bit how the company came into being and what problem were you and your team trying to solve at the time?
Yeah. So at the time, as the senior OSINT collector for 18th Airborne Corps, my main task was essentially looking over the entire world and trying to keep a pulse on it for General Donahue and his staff, as well as 3,000 other people. And I got to use a lot of tools, both tools that were already in use by the Army and Army Open Source Office, as well as tools that were looking at being used and piloted. During that time, I got to give a lot of feedback on tools, and I wished at the time the companies would actually listen and take that advice from someone who's actually a professional and a subject matter expert and run with it and make the best thing possible. Unfortunately, that wasn't really the case, and many people didn't really listen. So one day,
Mhm.
Christian, our CEO, gave me a call and asked what my opinion was of lots of the tools out on the market, and we both had the same opinion and same mindset of where everything was. Legacy systems such as data miner weren't cutting it anymore. There was dependency on keyword logic, which was slow and outdated and provided inaccurate reports. Reports that, like, for example, let's say you're looking at Lebanon, trying to monitor everything going on between, let's say, Hezbollah and Israel, and you'd be getting reports for Lebanon, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, that's a mess
Right.
for a client, but it's also an intelligence oversight issue.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so that was one of the major issues that I was running into, at least. And then the secondary issue was circular reporting. You would, let's take Israel and Iran for an example. Say Iran launches three missiles, but you have three different people reporting it. So you get three different reports on your feed, and you're spending time trying to figure out, okay, cool, we're three missiles launched, we're nine missiles launched, what's the full picture?
Mm.
And at the end of the day, as someone who is a collector or an analyst, 90% of the time when something big happens, you really don't have the time to sift through the information and try to figure it out. Um, and the way the tools work is there's no real actual context or understanding for what led up to it or the actual event. So you end up spending more time than you would if you were just doing the dirty work and clicking through a whole bunch of X accounts or Telegram accounts. So that's what I would end up doing pretty much every single day. And when Christian gave me that call, it really was an opportunity for us to change the landscape, both for you could say the DoD level or DoW level now, or also the private level, and most importantly, for the individuals as well, especially those who maybe run OSINT accounts, maybe work in small businesses, etc., that really don't have the funding required to get a tool like Data Miner. Data Miner might charge you $30,000 a seat, something along those lines, $15,000 to $30,000. That's a lot of money for a company that has a very tight overhead.
Yeah.
So what we did was we decided to make SITREP, and we said, let's go ahead and make it $10 a month for the paid version. But then we went one step further than that, and we have a free version of it also now. When you download the app, you could see up to 25 sit reps per month anywhere in the world, without having to pay anything. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to democratize intelligence and make it to where, anyone and everyone can see what's going on around the world without having to worry about biases that news platforms and social norms tend to push on topics now.
Yeah, look, just full disclosure here. I many years ago, and we are talking about around about the 2006 level. I was living in a Middle Eastern country at the time, doing some OSINT work for them, and it was at the time where data fusion was still at its very early stage. And the one thing that piqued my interest, of course, was a geospatial intelligence. But of course, it was so new that I was running into all sorts of old obstacles where I was actually working because, of course, there was this cognitive dissonance that was set up in the organization as to what is this thing and how does it work? And even though you'd explain how it would work, they couldn't visualize, say, 12 months down the track, what it would look like for the organization to have uptaken this technology and how it would actually improve intelligence collection and dissemination. So, in terms of the way that you guys set up Artorias and put your product out into the marketplace, what were the sort of strange obstacles that one would run into in terms of trying to get people to understand the product?
That's a really good question. Um, and it's one that we're still dealing with today. We're a very niche topic and area. Um, we've made it the last since launch, when was it? I think April of 2025, around that time period, we've made it in the top 25 and top 15 charts for news a few times. So the easiest way to classify us is probably as a news app. But at the end of the day, we like to at least I like to differentiate ourselves from a news app because we're not trying to we're not just trying to give you headlines. We're trying to give you actual information that's actionable. And the way we do that is by, I'm an army guy, so I try to make stuff, as simple as I can. So for example, all of our reports are in a 5 Ws format. You got your who, what, where, when, why, how, you have your source information. And what's really nice is it's more of an aggregate than anything else. It's not just a biased news platform, or it's not like Ground News, who's kind of giving you a tip on, hey, this is leaning right, this is leaning left. Okay, cool. The vast majority of people that are, using Ground News, I would assume, actually have the ability to figure out if something is biased or not in their own logical reasonings. So what we do is we provide the users with essentially, hey, this is the information, this is everything you need to know about it, this is where it came from. You do with that what you will, and your own beliefs on that source.
Mm.
Um, but then also on top of that, here's some analysis. Let's get those gears turning so you can start trying to figure out what this actually means.
So, what kind of data and analysis does SITREP provide, and how do you ensure accuracy and relevance in such a fast-moving information landscape. And just by the way, geopolitics these days is no longer niche. It's everywhere. I mean, hell, we're doing it.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's funny how things change. You would imagine that something like SITREP would find a much easier home now than, say, for instance, even 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, for that matter.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to kind of respond to that, it's a great question, is the fact that at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're providing information to the vast majority of our users are primarily risk consultancies,
Yeah.
or for example, let's say you're in a G-SOC or something along those lines. The vast majority of our users fall into that realm because when they found us from X, and they found us from the OSINT sphere with, large accounts posting about us when we came out. So that's really where we started, and we've been growing from that group outwards towards the normal population, which is, I think, why we're kind of in a kind of unique situation with the people that are actually using us and seeing us, and how the growth is, I guess you could say, somewhat slower, but the people that are coming in are very, very interesting people. They're
Mm.
people that are, the chief risk officers or chief security officers from multi-million or billion-dollar companies that are
Mm.
looking for new and useful solutions. And the type of the analysis that they're finding on there, it's honestly derived from how you would be doing work as a 35 Fox, because it comes from my
Mm.
background as an all-source intelligence analyst in the Army. All of our alerts are based off a pool of data for each country, which our intel team went through, sourced, and validated. Um, essentially, the AI goes through and we look for what you can consider PMECA scope, your political, military, economic, infrastructure, information, and social aspects. And it's kind of racking and stacking them based off priority level and seeing what the most important thing is going on, and then pushing those as they come in. So the analysis within there is really analysis that dives into the primary reaction of whatever happened, as well as secondary and tertiary effects.
Yeah, look, I have to say I use SITREP, so it's a fantastic app. And the one thing that I noticed is its uncanny ability to capture things in near real time. I mean, there's one example that I've had, and that was prior to the media reporting on the drones in Poland. I saw the report on SITREP 3 days prior to the first media announcement. And if ever there's something that I could add to saying, my God, that is useful. So I didn't have to wade through people's opinions about this or that or patchy media reporting. I actually got real-time intelligence at a time that I could then start putting down my own analysis on what was going on 3 days prior to the actual newsworthiness of the topic. So that in itself was worthwhile, certainly.
E- Exactly. And one area of the world that people are generally shocked by is the Sahel region.
Yeah.
Anyone that's familiar with it at all knows it's pretty much a black hole unless you have some very good sources that you're using from there.
Yeah.
And pretty much every single day we're finding news coming from the region that we'll find and post 3 days, 4 days, 5 days before it's picked up by any media outlet at all. And that's including the local regional news. Just because of how good the intel team was when they went through and they did their sourcing for these sources, and came up with their trust levels. It was
Yeah.
quite impressive.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Okay, so information security and reliability are critical today. How does SITREP handle data sourcing and privacy, especially given the sensitive nature of defense and intelligence topics?
Yeah, so obviously everything is very, very close to heart. Both
Yeah.
user data as well as the data that we collect when we're actually doing the what you could call the sourcing for everything. On the user side, we're very, very strict with what we actually collect. We want it to be as small and minimal as possible. Matter of fact, I'll go as far as saying, um, I would say roughly 70% of our users only use a Proton, and we don't collect passwords. So
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we don't actually have to collect anything personable from anyone. You could put your first name as anything, second name as anything, and have a burner email, never have to set up a password, and be able to use the app without any concerns. And then on the collection aspect and collection side of the house, Um, Essentially, the Intel team did a phenomenal job of going through every single country in the world and territory, as many as they could, and finding specific sources for each one of those regions. Um, One thing that's really special about the Intel team that we have is we have SMEs for pretty much the entire world, which have that knowledge and insight and those reliable sources that put us ahead of the curve in regards of making sure that we're in a good spot when we're collecting that data, as well as training our AI, our models and ensuring everything is along the lines they should be. Also, we have something that we call TSI, which is our Trusted Source Index. And it's kind of similar to HUMINT, right, John? Where you look at a source and you figure out how credible it is, how reliable it is, how many times it's been right, and you come up with a score that's assigned to it. Instead of using letters or anything along those lines, we use an integer. And from there, we're able to use a whole bunch of backend proprietary logic to determine, the reliability and credibility of a source. So that way, if something does happen, we're able to essentially figure out when the alert should be pushed, if we need amplified information for it, if we could just instantaneously push it based off source reliability. And there's just all that going on in the back end where no one else is doing anything remotely similar to that. It's really interesting to look at, especially from the back end side of things.
From the back end side of things, when we talk about places like Russia, for instance, I mean, obviously you'll have your sources, and we won't go into that. But how do you square a commercial product like SITREP with the likelihood that there will be people within Russia that could also access SITREP? I mean, for those people who are backing Ukraine, for instance, this could be a problem, morally and ethically.
So this is one of those unique situations where um, the best way to put it is we have our app be as biased as possible or as unbiased as possible because we don't want any bias. From that perspective, one could actually argue that it would be good for Russians to actually see what's going on in the front lines in Ukraine and understand the situation around them.
Yeah.
Same goes for China, same goes for Taiwan, same goes for all these other regions of the world.
Mm,
Um, but we also want to make sure that no one's using our app for anything that, they shouldn't be using it for.
mm,
Um,
mm, mm,
so we do monitor to look for any indicators that could be nefarious.
mm,
But so far we haven't observed any. I will go as far as saying on the APC, the Artorias private client side of the house, which is the business side, we are very, very, very particular about who we actually bring on board with that, and we have a full acceptance team because the tool on APC is even stronger than SITREP. It's, I would say, probably tenfold stronger. John, you even seen it yourself on in the real time decision making and everything that's hosted within there.
yeah,
Um,
amazing. Yeah.
the one thing we really don't want to happen is an adversary to be able to get access to anything along those lines. So
Yeah.
that's where we're taking lots of precautions and actually doing full deep dives into, companies and industries before they're even able to see what APC
Mm,
looks like.
yeah. Yeah.
Because we don't want that to get in the wrong hands and affect friendly forces around the world.
Mm. Okay, so today everything is about AI and how AI is shaping everything from collection and interpretation of data. But what is the man-machine interface like at Artorias? I mean, how much of it is AI? How much of it is personnel on the ground? Can you give us an idea of what is the product? Is it a human thing? Is it just a fully AI thing?
Yeah, so I'll give you the simple answer to that. Data Miner, for example, has I believe over 700 employees.
Mhm.
We have roughly a dozen. And we're still doing
Yeah,
alerts for the entire world. The best
right.
way to put it is that we utilize human in the loop analysis. So what's going on is, like I said in the first part of it, we have human OSINT collectors and professionals essentially go in and figure out what is good, right?
Mm,
So, hey, what is the source? What are the sources we're going to be using? How reliable are those? And are there any biases? Because at the end of the day, as humans, that's our responsibility. We have to be responsible with technology, especially as it advances.
mm,
Um, So that's the first side of things. The second side of things is our Intel team is constantly going through and doing audits to make sure that the information is accurate and that there's no issues with it. So that includes looking for bias, that includes looking for misinformation, disinformation, um, and all those things. And if anything is identified, they essentially go and figure out the root cause of it. For example, let's say it's a source. For example, this has happened in the OSINT sphere many times on social media. There will be sources that are very good sources, but then maybe a government entity gets to them, or they vanish for a while and come back, and maybe it's not actually that person again, and it's being used for another alternative method, or not method, but purpose. So we do go through continuously to make sure that we're up to date and accurate, so that way we're enabling the AI to do its job. I'd say, 80% plus of the workload is all technology and backend and AI. It's
Right.
incredibly impressive. The other 20% though is vital to that 80% success.
Mhm.
Without the humans in the loop, I have no idea what the app would be doing right now, you know?
So you're not building a sort of a back channel to Terminator or Skynet or something, yeah?
No, no, no
Good.
Skynet yet. Not in 2025 or 2026.
All right.
Uh,
Excellent. That's what we need to know.
no, it's one of those things where, I know people who are very, very scared of AI
Yeah.
and very scared for a few reasons. There's people that think it's evil. There's people that think that it's going to take their jobs.
Mm,
And there's people that are cautiously optimistic. And then there's people that understand the full capability of AI, but also want to be cautious.
yeah.
And I think that's kind of the realm that I fall in with it, because I've seen what we've been able to do within a year, and it's astronomically impressive.
Mm,
And then you start thinking of what you could do down the road, with new technology and new things as they advance. You throw quantum computing into the mix. What can I do with
wow.
an AI with
Yeah.
all of our information and data that we have right now, and throw quantum computing into it?
Mm,
And I can make codes for the entire world in a matter of seconds, you know? So there's definitely that forward logic of thinking like, hey, how can we use this in the future, and how's that going to change? Because it will change, not just as us, but as a world as a whole. Technology is going to advance. And the next step is quantum computing, and that's going to, I think, one of the first things that's going to have a major overhaul and capability is going to be AI.
mm.
And that's going to enable a lot of industries to succeed. And one of those industries is, I think, ours.
Look, I just want to pose this question. Um, I'm glad that you're cautiously optimistic about the future of technology. I sort of am, and then sometimes I get into that oh my God kind of moment. But in terms of trying to figure out a path forward, I've always looked at computers and whatnot and AI as a tool to use, just like you're saying you're using AI as a tool, right? And you can see the future and you can see the potential of doing better, faster over time. But of course, we've got the media, and the media keep on selling us all these terrifying stories of we're one step away from general artificial intelligence. It's going to take over everything. You know, there is going to be the Skynet moment, and we're all doomed. I mean, how does that? I mean, for a company like yours, for instance, with people who have swallowed the Kool-Aid on AI, how does this make you feel? You know, I mean, does it make it an easier sell? You know, when you sort of walk your potential client through everything, and then they sit back and maybe they're techno skeptics and they think, oh my God, you know, these guys are onto something, but maybe it's not going to be great for the long term.
So I think that's a really good question. And I've kind of wrestled with the thought myself, like, hey, um, what does this look like in the future?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what are the full capabilities? And like I was saying earlier, what are the secondary and tertiary effects?
yeah.
I think that the main aspect that I always like to reinsure our clients when we're discussing with APC at least, is at the end of the day, and this would go to, I tell all of our users this as well, and your listeners, at the end of the day, we're a tool, we're a manpower
Mm,
multiplier, and we don't want to be more than that. We
mm.
want to enable those teams around the world. We want to enable, big G-SOCs and small G-SOCs alike. Um,
Before you go down that path, because I know that we can end up being very jargon laden. What is a G-SOC for our audience?
So essentially, it's a security team. It's a security
Yeah,
cell is the best way to put it for your listeners.
cool.
And essentially, it's the people that are looking at physical threats around the world and people and things that could impact them.
Mm.
Um, my apologies that this is the first time that's happened, I think, on this call. And considering my past in the army, I'm quite impressed that I made it this far without that happening. So, um, yeah. So I think that's the best way to put it is really we want to enable those teams, but we don't want to take those teams over. We don't
Mm.
want to just replace humans. We want to make sure humans look good when they're doing their job.
Yeah.
That's one joke I always make is, you could do it yourself, yeah, or you could, use this. You'll get it done a lot faster. You'll be
Mm.
a lot more efficient, and you'll look a lot better in the process also, because instead of taking 10 or 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, you could get it done in a minute.
Yeah.
And that's really, what I think most people have to hear is just that little bit of reassurance
Mm.
that we're not here to take over the world, or we're not here to um, take people's jobs. Because I think honestly, most people, I think that's where the fear comes from. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
that
definitely.
that that desire to know that you're taken care of, your family has food and has money, and that you can
Yeah.
survive,
And you have a
and
purpose.
that you have a purpose in life. And
Mm.
that's one of the things that separates humans from everything else on earth. That our conscious
Yeah.
ability to understand that we do have a purpose and we do have a place and a role.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and I think being able to reinsure that we're not going to rob that from people is often something that kind of lightens the mood a little bit.
Mm. Indeed, it does. Okay, so Shane, we often talk about information fatigue. How does a product like SITREP help cut through the noise to give users what they need to know, not just what's trending?
Yeah, that's a great question. At the end of the day, there's stories and reports from all over the world, right? um there's stories that are very, very loud, and there's stories that are very quiet.
Mm.
Generally, a story, though, is either on this side or this side. You rarely get a story in the middle. So for, let's say, one thing happens, you'll get maybe six different versions of it through different media outlets, and it's very noisy. Um, Same goes, honestly, comparable for data miner compared to us. You might get 30 alerts about one thing. You might get six alerts about one thing. It really just depends on the day and the sources that they have within their scraper.
Mm.
For us, we want to eliminate that. And it comes down to making sure there's no circular reporting, first of all. Circular reporting was one of my biggest pet peeves as an intelligence collector, as an OSINT collector for 18th Airborne Corps.
Yeah.
What it is when something happens, then it gets reported again. Maybe it gets reported again also. But what it's doing is it's wasting your time.
Mm.
So you get that plus a mix of a whole bunch of other things that you don't care about, and it's like a fire hose of information, and
Yes.
it's very overwhelming. And as a result, most people do this: turn off, put down. Either that or they go crazy trying to figure out what's what. What
Mm.
we want to do is make that not really the choices they have to choose from. We want it to be, hey, let me go to SITREP. Let me see what's going on in any country in the world. Click on the country, scroll, and even sort by impact level. So, for example, if you want to only know the really big stuff happening, let's say you're going to go on a vacation to Italy, you go to Italy, click on high, and see what the major things are going on in Italy. Okay, is this still somewhere I want to go, or is maybe there's a change and a shift and something going on? Let me see what's happening and see the big stuff. And I know I have friends who have friends around the world, and one thing that they do to keep up to date with their friends in other portions of the world is they add that country to their watch list, and then
Mm.
from there they can kind of just keep up with what's going on and pick up a conversation with their friend that they maybe they speak with a few times a month, be like, hey, heard your guys' elections, this happened or that happened. um
Mm.
Meanwhile, in reality, the normal world living outside of SITREP, you really have to dig to find the vast majority of stuff happening if you're not in a major country, or let's say you're an American, you're trying to look outside America, maybe at a small, Eastern European country. Um, you're going to have a difficult time keeping up with the narratives of what's happening. What we want to
Mm.
do is make it so it's simple and it's easy to do without having to sift through thousands of things that are leaning one way or the other way and just making a whole big mess out of the information space.
Well, going back on something that we spoke about earlier, and that is, when you're dealing with countries like Russia and China and North Korea and various places that are hard to get at, and where the information is tainted because of state control, how is it that you can get a source in countries of that nature to come up with something that's going to be reasonable to feed into your system, for instance?
Yeah, that's a great question. The best way to put it is as a professional OSINT collector, you kind of have your own areas that you're a SME in. For me,
Mm,
my area of expertise, the portions of the world that I collected on a daily basis for the Army was the Middle East and Indo-PACOM. And for each of those countries, I had my own list of reputable sources that I trusted that were firsthand accounts.
mhm.
Um, the which is really what makes it difficult for so many people to actually, like you said, get that information in places that it's hard to get.
Yeah.
What SITREP does is we kind of, um, the best way to put it is we kind of get that information, we catch it, and we put it in a data lake for you. And then we go through, we parse, we find the stuff that matters and give it to you. So
Yeah.
that way you're getting, first of all, good quality information, and you're only getting the information you need, not the noise and not the bias. So that's really one of the things that's really special about how we do it is the fact that, if you wanted to find a report for, let's say, a country in the Sahel, um, you're going to have to wait for regional news to pick it up, and it's probably going to be biased in one way or another. Or you could, spend a lot of hours and become a professional listener and, just manually check it all day long with the rest of your list of sources, which is very time consuming and quite annoying. So the easiest solution for both sides of the house is really SITREP, download the app. It already has probably the sources that you're using anyways. Um, and it provides it in a way that you're not having to constantly refresh, click on tabs, refresh. And for those not in the community, it gives you essentially backstage access to the things that intelligence professionals are looking at.
Okay, so Shane, walk us through the user journey. When someone opens up SITREP for the first time, what can they expect and how easy is it to customize and get the most out of the app?
Yeah, so when we made the app, one thing that we wanted to make sure of is that it would be easy to use for the general population, but also have that kind of bespoke feel that
Mm,
you would get from a professional intelligence tool. We didn't want it to be, we didn't want it to look like a news app. We wanted it to look like a tool, because it's what it is. At the end of the day, it's a tool for professionals and for anyone that wants to know what's going on around the world. So you download the app, you go to the App Store, search SITREP, download it. When you first sign in, essentially it's going to be like, hey, create an account. The only reason we have to do this is because there's so much data out there that we're giving to the entire world. We have to have some idea of where it's going to, like you said in the beginning, making sure, for example, hostile nations or anything along those lines don't gain access to anything they shouldn't. Um, and then from there, like I said before, you can make a burner. You could put PW whatever as your first and last name. I don't care. You don't have to create a password. And then after you create your account, you'll essentially get a verification email. I'll have a code in it. You'll put that in. You'll gain access to the platform. Once you're in, you'll be asked pretty much one simple question, and that is, what areas of the world are you interested in? What's your watch list? What do you want to know about? And one thing that's really cool about it that one of our devs came up with, I didn't even know he did it until I asked him. Um, but the way that the country list is sorted for your initial watch list is based off essentially the number of users that have watched list the country. So for example, it's maybe you have China, Russia, Israel, um, Mexico, Venezuela, XXXXX in order of how many people have added it to their watch list. The reason why that's really nice is for someone coming into the app, they don't have to try to find a country and add it in a weird way. Chances are it's going to be there without them having to scroll. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible, I guess you could say. And
mm,
it was a good idea. I liked it. So you do that, you set your initial watch list, you get in, and I guess you could say the main page that you get is a little globe. The globe's interactive. You're able to click on, we call them pings on the map, and those
yeah.
pings are either orange, yellow, or red. Um, I said orange, yellow, or red. I'm sorry, green, yellow, or red.
Man,
And
that's right there. I had to think
I,
about it that myself.
I know I was like, that doesn't sound right.
Yep.
Green is for low level alerts, yellow is for those medium level alerts, and red is for the high level alerts. You click on those alerts, they'll bring you right to the report. So you can spin the globe around. Let's say you want to see what's going on in Africa, zoom in on Africa, and you'll see all the pings going on in the country. Those pings are the most recent reports that happened there. So you can
Yep.
click on those, pull the report out, and start driving into the information. When you're actually within the report, if it's something that you think you want to save for later, you can go ahead and save it. It'll go into your saved list. The other thing you can do is you could also share it. So if there's a colleague that maybe you're working on a project with, you can share it to them so they have access to it as well. Um, Also, let's say that you're like me and you have an inquisitive mind, and maybe you like to doom scroll every once in a while.
Oh yeah.
On
I'll put my hand up for that one.
the so the latest is probably where you like to live, John.
Yes.
And the latest feed, essentially all you have to do is you scroll through it and you get the reports as they're coming in real time. And there's literally reports for the entire world that'll just populate in front of your eyes. It's almost like witchcraft when you see it happening. I remember the first time that I got my hands on the app in test flight and was able to actually see it in use on my phone. We only had about 10 countries in the app. And even with 10 countries, I was impressed with the information coming in. And I was like, wait, no, wait, this actually happened? And I was going through search. I'm like, oh, okay, apparently, yeah, US Black Hawk crashed in Nicaragua. Who knew? I know now.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
so you can go through the latest, get information that way. You can also sort the latest by low, medium, and high. So if you only want to know the big stuff going around the world, you could do that as well. Um, and then the second tab on that page is the watch list page. And what that lets you do is essentially scroll through the alerts on your watch list. So you're only seeing the alerts that matter to you for the countries that you care about. Now, maybe you're thinking, what happens if I find a really cool country, or based off the latest feed, and I want to add that to my watch list? All you have to do is when you're looking at the report, there's a little eye icon on the top right hand side. You click on that button. It'll give you an option to add it to your watch list. One thing that's really important about us or about this process was we wanted to make sure that people weren't being bombarded by notifications. So we
Yeah.
made the notifications customizable for when you add things to your watch list. You could even have it set so you don't get notifications for things on your watch list, or you could have notifications for everything if you really wanted it, or for medium, high, or just high. Um, Also, your daily briefings live in there as well. You can get notifications for those or not. It's really the user's choice. But it's a really strong tool, and there's a lot you can do with it. That's the first step of it. That's the first side. The second side is the ability to search. So this is kind of a power user tool that most people don't know about. I think this is one of the first things I showed you when me and you had a discussion was the ability to search terms and tags.
Yes.
So if you go within the app, there's a little magnifying glass. If you click on that, it'll give you the option to search for something. So let's say you're typing military in, you'll actually be able to pull up military training, for example. Click on military training and you'll see every single military training going on in the entire world. You want to feel like an intelligence professional, that's a pretty easy way to do it.
Yeah.
Um, so there's some really cool stuff you could do with the search feature also, but that's the general what you run into as a first time user in the app.
Yeah, I've got to say the customizable aspect with notifications was a thing I ran into because initially when I downloaded the app and I was starting to use it and I was going, oh my God, this is like incredible. It almost gives me a god's eye view of the world. But then there was the notifications because of course my country watch list is quite extensive, as you can understand, Shane, because of my doom porn habits. And so of course I had the thing going off ding 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 constantly because you really do get stuff in all the time. I mean, so now I've got it on silent. If I see a message flash up and it's on silent, I'll see whether or not I need to look at it or just put the phone down. So it's actually very useful. Yeah, yeah, for sure. So
Absolutely.
Shane, looking ahead, what's next for SITREP and for Artorias generally? I mean, do you have any new features, partnerships, or directions you can give us a bit of a sneak peek into?
Yeah. We actually have a new feature that should be rolling out pretty soon. It's called Intel trees or Intel pins. And essentially what that does is it kind of fuses geospatial information into the reports in a much bigger way than currently is. What it's going to do is essentially whenever a report occurs, um, the AI is going to do its job, and it's going to also do the job of geospatial analyst, and it's
Yeah.
going to look at the context of the report, which gets, let's say it's the report's comprised of three different things it saw, right? Let's say that there's a few different locations mentioned. Like let's say there is um a really cool one for an example for it was Ukraine when the Starlinks
Mm.
went down.
Right.
Um, when the Starlinks went down for Ukraine about a month ago, what it did was it actually put it in, essentially, it was able to collect, let me slow down. It was able to collect all the different reports from the different commands in Ukraine and identified that they were having Starlink issues. From there, produced one report. That one report happened to have intel pins for every single command that was having issues, and you could literally see the disruption across the map, across I think it was 6 or 7 different areas of Ukraine. It was quite impressive. So that's
Mm.
one example of a use case for those intel trees. Another one, for example, let's say there's a shooting that occurs, and then let's say right after the shooting, there's a protest or something along those lines. It'll go ahead and it'll mark both those locations, be like, hey, there's a shooting right here. And by the way, there's a protest because of the shooting, or there's a whole bunch of disruptions going on in this vicinity to that shooting. So it's a very strong aspect that's going to be coming in very soon. And each one
Mm.
of those intel trees gives essentially a little bit of bottom line up front for what the pin is. So it'll drop a
Yep.
pin on it and it'll be like um, Ukrainian Starlink down or active shooter reported at this address, which brings into the next new portion of it. And that's the ability to actually get down to the street level for some of these reports and
Oh,
also
what?
duplicate things that are going on. So yeah, it's awesome. I don't think you knew about that one. Um,
Damn.
and essentially what it's going to do is we have 3D modeling in the back end. So you when you have SITREP, even right now, you could zoom in, and if you zoom in, you'll see
Yeah.
3D models of the world.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing is we're going in and we're actually combining the geospatial capability that we have right now with that 3D mapping capability that we already have within SITREP. And what
Yeah.
that's able to do is essentially we have different aspects that it looks at based off the first of all information in the report and the type of report, but
Mm.
also the quality of that information in it. So, for example, if it's just a town that's mentioned or just a city, okay, I'll be at the city level. But if it's something, let's say an active shooter, something along those lines, and we're able to actually geolocate that, it will go down straight to the street level and actually
Oh,
show you where it happened.
I mean, it's insane. It's insanely good, but it's insane because again, I mean, uh, I was talking to a colleague of mine that, we're going to be talking to you, and they said, yes, it's all 1984 technology. As I was trying to explain to them, all the good things that come out of this technology for people in our field, but it's all very, it's very dangerous going down this particular path. Geolocation, oh my God, at the individual level, at the street level. But look, honestly, I mean, in terms of people wanting to know stuff without having the media act as your intermediary, I think that this is the best way forward. So yeah, yeah, I can see the great benefits of this.
And then the next step, obviously, is the ability to also, so for example, let's say users traveling, they don't have the news media around them, but
Right,
they want to be
right.
safe. The
Yeah.
next level to this is the ability to actually opt in for, we haven't really come up with a name yet. This is, 100-yard stuff,
Mm,
but the ability to essentially turn on location awareness
mm.
for tracking purposes to be able to geoping and see where you are in correlation to reports. So
Oh,
if
no
something
way.
near you,
Yeah.
you have it set up to get an alert for, if it's, let's say if it's within 10 miles or 50 miles or something along those lines. So let's
Yeah.
say you're traveling the world, you're going through Europe or something along those lines.
Mm,
Um, I'm sorry, I don't know what the stations are in France. I don't have a French media app,
mm.
but I do have SITREP. And as
Yeah.
I'm going through, I can go ahead and I can get those alerts if something does happen near me. Because
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that me and Christian, Stefano, and the rest of the team talked about when we created Artorias was making the world a safer place. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like alerting is one aspect, right? The other aspect is the democratizing intelligence. The last aspect is making the world safer.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we're striving for.
So making the world safer by making it more transparent, because you're less likely to be blindsided when you've got the information at your fingertips. Yeah.
Exactly. And the thought process behind it is, say you're going to go somewhere, maybe we add an ability to where, hey, you're going to be taking a trip, you have a trip feature. And
Mm-hmm.
for this blocked period of time, it'll add the countries you're going to be going to or locations you're going to be going to a watch list. So you
Yeah.
can click on trips, see all the news for what's going on in your trip. And then once your trip starts, maybe it hands it over towards that tracking ability to make sure that you're safe while you're there. Or maybe we tie that to your itinerary. Like, okay, you're going to be in these countries for this time. You'll get alerts for this during this time. There's a few different ways we can handle it. And I think that, the future is very bright for this space.
Mm.
Um, Primarily because someone's actually trying to do something with it. For the last, I don't even know how, I can't even tell you how long there hasn't been a change in the space. It's been
Mm.
stagnant. Data
Mm.
miner has been overcharging corporate clients and overcharging the US government. And we're really here to change that, both for the individuals at home and also for private industries, companies, and the US government.
Shane, we've spoken about SITREP, we've spoken about your company Artorias. Let's now go into the weeds, shall we? So, speaking as someone who is deeply involved in the, open source intelligence community, what do you see as the three most pressing issues facing the United States and the world right now?
Wow, that's a fun one. It's a hard one. Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that I guess I've always kind of war gamed in my mind. Being, an all source intelligence analyst, you have two sides of your brain, right? You have the most likely side and then you have the most dangerous side. And I think
Yeah.
there's that could kind of go for this approach also. Obviously, the main areas that I think near any analyst would say would probably be what's going on in Europe with Russia and
Yeah.
Ukraine and seeing what happens there, if there's any spillover or not. Um, the second one would probably be China, what happens with China and Taiwan, because China has a ticking time clock on if they're going to do something. It's ticking. They need to make a choice at some point or another.
Mm.
Um, and then I think one that is also intriguing to me now because of the current geopolitical situation is US Mexico relations for a few reasons. One of those
Yeah.
big reasons is because the added stress that it's going to cause towards the general population as well
Mm.
as service members. And as someone who has an experience in the intel field and also CI field, counterintelligence field, I could tell you right now that every single peer near peer country is going to be looking at ways to exploit those weaknesses and to draw a
Mm.
divide. And if they can do
Yeah.
that, take that opportunity, um, because that's how they succeed. And
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I think those are the things that are really intriguing to me. And I think there's 20 other things in my mind that cause concern to me, like Israel. What happens with Israel? Israel, Netanyahu's cabinet they need conflict to stay in power generally.
Mm.
Where do they look next? I know one report that I saw about a year ago highlighted Turkey as being one of the biggest things that Israel is looking at next. And
Mm.
Turkey's been a common picture with what's going on with NATO,
Yeah.
and the buttons that they're pushing with Russia. I mean, does something reignite in the Middle East because of Israel and Turkey? That'd be crazy if it did. But,
Mm.
maybe that falls into the most dangerous category instead of the most likely category because I don't think it's going to happen. But if it did happen, it would put insurmountable pressure on NATO. NATO's already in a state that's kind of intriguing as it is with everything going on with Europe. So there's so many different problem sets right now that I think, you know, each one has a timetable and
Mm.
each one has its own decision points.
Mm.
And I know I could tell you this as the senior collector for 18th Airborne Corps, it was really difficult to keep a pulse on the entire world. because you'd think you'd get the picture of the world, and then all of a sudden there'd be, let's say a random coup in Africa. And then you have
Mm,
to figure
mm.
out, okay, what's the presence in the country? Is there Russian presence? Is there Chinese presence? Is there US presence? What are the secondary, tertiary effects? And then out of nowhere, something that wasn't even on the map could be a major issue geopolitically and have overarching effects.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you raised something really interesting. Now, we spoke to your colleague Stefano Rittendale not that long ago on Mexican cartels, and you raised Mexico, but I'd like to stretch that a little bit further out because being a US citizen, you'd be concerned with a lot of the dynamics south of the border, not just with Mexico, not just with drug cartels, but the thing that you just touched on, the ability for external powers to manipulate what is going on between the United States and its Latin American partners or neighbors, I should say. So, if we look at it from the perspective of as Latin America being a chessboard, a new chessboard, one that has been largely under US control for much of the 20th century, but now it has a large Chinese presence. It even has an Iranian presence. So, at what point will these powers start exercising their geopolitical heft to counterbalance the United States in areas that would make it very difficult for the US, especially if they've got their eye across the Pacific on China? They've got like at least half an eye across the Atlantic looking at Russia. I mean,
It's-
yeah. I mean, this speaks to a great vulnerability here, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point there. The Belt and Road Initiative was something that has completely shifted Chinese geopolitics and
Yeah.
also how the US looks at what's going on around the world. Um, Look at Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Look at Djibouti.
Yeah.
Do you know the two nations that have a naval base in Djibouti? One is the United States, the other is China.
Yes.
And for example, when you look at favoritism, you look at the logistic capabilities and why it's in Djibouti. If you look at the railhead that was the rail track that is built through Djibouti to Ethiopia via BRI, it
Mm,
runs straight into the Chinese naval port and
mm,
down into Africa. So that same approach and same effect, I think, is being taken in South America as well.
yeah.
And it's something that part of me wonders if Venezuela, the everything going on in Venezuela right now, is almost posturing from the US to say, hey, we are willing to take action in South America if we need.
Mm,
Do you guys want to raise the bed? You want to raise the ante? What's going on?
mm,
Um,
mm,
so I think is an interesting topic. I think I will completely say right now South America is not my area of expertise.
mm.
Stefano could talk about Venezuela all day and all night and everything going
Yeah.
on there. Um,
And we will get him back on to talk about that. Believe it.
but yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to say the very least. And one question that I have myself also, and I guess you could say the kind of the weird OSINT things that people aren't tracking but should, is how are the BRI projects holding up that
Mm,
China conducted across Africa and across South America? Lots of them are
mm,
dams, roadways, bridges, infrastructure, things like that. And we've seen before Chinese concrete doesn't hold up too well. What happens when that infrastructure starts failing, if it does?
mm,
And does that present an opportunity for the United States to act where we didn't act before and stop turning a blind eye on lots of these countries that were needing assistance? Um, it's funny when I first started up at 18th Airborne Corps, when I was waiting to get my read on so I could go into the ACE, they had me do a white page on BRI,
mm,
specifically BRI in we'll call it BRI. And essentially the argument was to be as bias free as possible and figure out what China's actual end state is with it. And I think lots of people paint it as being a very large um military plan that, China's working on doing all this stuff as a master plan, their debt trap diplomacy, all this stuff.
Yep.
Um, I would argue that at least the initial deals that China did the first few years, they were overeager to start BRI and to expand.
Mm.
And I think lots of these small nations were also overeager to get the programs without actually doing a full analysis of their ability to pay them off.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when those projects start failing, if they do fail,
Mm.
because does China come in and repair it for free and use that as a way to somehow fuel their their economy back home and look good to those nations?
Yeah.
Or does America step in and say, hey, we can assist you, sorry China gave you some bad stuff, but we can make it better. I think
Mm.
it's something that could be kind of interesting moving ahead of the next few decades.
Shane, I'd like to be as optimistic as you are about the US stepping in and doing stuff, but under the current administration, where international aid has been pulled all over the place and has been done in a very egalitarian manner, it doesn't matter where it went, it's now all been pulled back. I can't imagine an administration aligned to the current one into the future, saying to an African state, oh, by the way, you know that BRI project that you had problems with? We'll step in and fix it for you. Because, most of these countries are very poor and can't pay for it. So they are dependent on the largesse of a great power. But you need to be willing to play that game. And currently in the United States, I think that the political winds aren't favorable for that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But the Americans, I mean, just to push a little bit harder on this, under the Biden administration, sleepy Joe Biden, I recall that the Americans were trying to work out a different counterbalance to BRI, and that was, I believe, the blue dot strategy, where they would try to build a counter BRI infrastructure, especially through Oceania and into Asia, and that would be the thing that would allow it to compete with BRI. Now, I'm sure that that must have been turfed quite suddenly upon the re-election of Donald Trump,
Hit
but
the
it would
brakes.
be. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It would be interesting to see just how America under Trump decides to play its hand here. Because, whatever you say about Trump, and many people could say many bad things about him, the strategic ambiguity that we're laboring under cuts both ways. It can be both good and it can be bad because we're always looking now at the United States as the great disruptor. We don't know where it's going. We don't know what it's going to be doing. And maybe that is realism at its finest point. But for those people who believe that international relations and even military strategy and policy is based on predictability, a level of predictability for the end user as well as for the adversary, so we all know where we're sort of situating ourselves, this can be rather difficult. It's certainly a much more difficult environment, which leads me to the next question. American philosopher Steven Pinker has argued that the world has, in relative terms, become more peaceful, and that large-scale great power conflict is less likely than it was in the 20th century. Now, Shane, with your knowledge, do you share that view, or do you see the current period as one of rising instability beneath the surface?
It's a really, really good talking point. I think it could easily be argued both ways.
Hmm.
One big thing I would highlight is we're only a quarter way into this century. It'd be like watching the first 30 minutes of a war movie before the war started and not knowing. For all we know,
Mm-hmm.
it could take a complete 360. The one thing I would highlight is we've seen with Russia and Ukraine, what's shifted into a cold war, or is turned into a war of attrition at the end of the day, a frozen war,
Yeah,
in which it's about, hey, like, what can you take as a government, or as an economy, as a people, as a nation, and how long can you stand?
yeah,
And also, what's your capability? Like we've seen Russia completely shift, their economy to be able to try to keep up with the demands. And we've seen Ukraine modify their forces and technology to be able to maybe catch up for where their manpower falls short in compared to Russia. Different style of fighting, meat grinder versus more more Western style doctrine. Um, but in regards to the world being a safer place, I would argue that it is by numbers so far, based off what we can see right now and looking forward, it is predictably going to be a less deadly place unless, the big red button is pushed.
Mm.
But I don't believe or subscribe to the fact that means it's safer.
Yep.
Um, just because there are less deaths because of overall conflict doesn't mean it's safer, in my opinion.
Mm.
We've seen just in the last 20 years how many wars and coups start up around the world. We've seen governments overthrown literally every few years at this point. On top of a major war in Russia and Ukraine, that looks like it's getting to the point of, hey, what happens next? Do we actually get peace? Is
Mm.
Trump able to push both sides to a peace deal, which he's trying to do,
Yep.
or does Russia get backed into a corner in which they say, hey, we have to escalate to de-escalate? And if that
Mm.
happens, I think that's kind of the decision point right there is do we start shifting towards a reality in which we are a less deadly century, or do we shift towards a reality in which we are as deadly or potentially more deadly, dependent on the outcome?
Yeah. Dangerous. All right. Oh, well, anyway, Shane, this has been a fascinating discussion. And as always, it's great to see a company leading innovation in the global information space. Now, for our listeners who want to stay ahead of the curve, download SITREP today on iOS or Android. There is a minor monthly cost, but for that, you will have the world at your fingertips. Experience firsthand how Artorias is redefining real-time intelligence. Shane, thank you for joining us on The Focus.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
As someone who also works in the open source intelligence space, I have to say it's heartening to see innovation pushing boundaries in this field. What Artorias has built with SITREP isn't just another app, it's a tool that helps people make sense of complexity in real time. No politics, just the facts. In a world saturated with information and misinformation, clarity becomes a strategic asset. The ability to cut through the noise, verify what's real, and understand the deeper context behind events is no longer optional. It's essential. SITREP gives users that edge, and in doing so, it strengthens the broader ecosystem of informed analysis that so many of us depend on. Now, on to questions for the audience. In an age where AI and algorithms curate most of what we see online, do you trust open source intelligence tools more or less than traditional media? If clarity is power, who do you think benefits most from a tool like SITREP? Individuals, governments, or corporations? And should everyone have access to this kind of real time intelligence? From your perspective, are we heading toward a more peaceful world, as Steven Pinker suggests, or are we simply entering a quieter phase before the next great power confrontation? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a free way to support us. You can also subscribe to the podcast on the Ozcast Network, iTunes, and Spotify, where we'd appreciate your 5-star reviews. Do you have comments or questions about the podcast? Post them in the comments section on YouTube, and I'll do my best to respond to as many as I can. My thanks as ever to the producers of The Focus, Neil Smart and Lynn Sear. Please stay connected with us on social media. Follow me on X at BruniDoctor and follow The Focus on X at TheFocus_Sage. And don't forget Blue Sky on the Focus pod adl.bsky.social. From Adelaide, South Australia, you've been listening to The Focus.